Byron Donalds thought he had Jasmine Crockett cornered. The Florida Republican stood confidently at the House Financial Services Committee hearing, pointing his finger directly at the Texas Democrat as cameras rolled live on C-SPAN. His voice carried the authority of someone who had never lost a public debate, someone who had built his entire political brand on these moments of confrontation. "That's a complete lie and you know it," he declared, his voice echoing through the packed hearing room. The words hung in the air like a challenge thrown down in front of the entire nation. Donalds had that look in his eyes, the same expression he wore when he dismantled Democratic arguments on Fox News, when he made liberal commentators stumble over their words, when he turned committee hearings into viral conservative victories. Behind him, his staff exchanged confident glances. This was Byron at his best, aggressive, articulate, and absolutely certain of his ground. They had coached him for this moment, prepared talking points, even practiced the finger-pointing gesture that had become his signature move. Conservative Twitter was about to explode with clips of him destroying another Democrat on live television. The audience held its breath. Committee members leaned forward. You could hear phones buzzing as word spread through the Capitol that something big was happening in the financial services hearing. Congressional staffers were rushing into the room, crowding against the back walls. Even senators from other committees were peeking in through the doorway. Crockett, sitting calmly in her navy blazer, simply smiled and reached for her phone. The gesture was so casual, so confident, that it sent a chill through the Republican side of the room. What happened in the next 30 seconds would leave Donalds speechless, send shockwaves through Congress, and create one of the most viral political moments of Mr. Donalds, Crockett said, her voice steady as steel, "Would you like to hear the recording?" The room fell silent. Donalds' confident expression began to crack, because what Jasmine Crockett was about to play would expose everything, and potentially end Byron Donalds' rising political career forever. You could feel the shift in the room's energy. Republican staffers who had been smugly typing victory tweets suddenly stopped. Democratic members who had been preparing for another typical Donalds rant sat up straighter. The C-SPAN cameras zoomed in closer, operators instinctively knowing they were about to capture something historic. Even the reporters in the back row put down their phones and pulled out notebooks, sensing that this wasn't going to be just another clip for the evening news cycle. This felt different. This felt like one of those moments that changes everything. The tension in that hearing room was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Security guards positioned themselves closer to the witness table, sensing something big was about to happen. C-SPAN cameras zoomed in on both faces. Donald still pointing accusingly, Crockett calmly holding her phone like it contained nuclear codes. What made this moment even more explosive was the time. This wasn't just any committee hearing. It was being broadcast live during prime time, with millions of Americans watching. Political junkies had been following the brewing feud between these two rising stars for weeks, and now it was all coming to a head on national television. Before we dive into this explosive confrontation that would change both their careers forever, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss these jaw-dropping political moments. Trust me, what you're about to see will have you replaying it over and over again. Now let's see how one recording changed everything. To understand why this moment was so devastating, you need to know who these two rising stars really are, and why this confrontation had been building for months. At 45, Byron Donalds had become the golden boy of the Republican Party. The Florida congressman, one of only 2 black Republicans in the House, was being groomed for bigger things. Trump loved him. Fox News couldn't get enough of him. Conservative donors were already whispering about a Senate run, maybe even higher office. Donalds had built his reputation on being the truth teller, the guy who called out Democratic hypocrisy without fear. His social media following had exploded to over 800,000 followers who hung on his every word. He regularly appeared on Fox News, Newsmax, and conservative podcasts, where hosts praised his no-nonsense approach and willingness to say what others won't. Behind the scenes, Donalds was ambitious, perhaps too ambitious. Colleagues whispered that he was already eyeing the Senate seat that would open up when Marco Rubio's term ended. Some even suggested he had his sights set on the 2032 presidential race. He was young, articulate, and fearless in debate, or so everyone thought. But ambition can make people reckless, and Donalds had been getting increasingly bold in his statements, both public and private, confident that his rising star status would protect him from any real consequence. Friends had warned him that he was becoming too aggressive, too willing to say anything, for a soundbite. His wife had specifically cautioned him about his inflammatory rhetoric during private meetings. "You're going to say something that you can't take back," she had told him just weeks before. Not everything needs to be a battle, Byron. But success had made him cocky, and cocky politicians make fatal mistakes. The truth was, Donalds had started believing his own press clippings. When Fox News hosts called him fearless, he took it as license to be reckless. When conservative donors praised his straight talk, he pushed the boundaries even further. He had forgotten the golden rule of politics: always assume someone is listening. Across the aisle sat 42-year-old Jasmine Crockett, the Texas Democrat, who had quickly earned a reputation as one of the most formidable debaters in Congress. A former criminal defense attorney, Crockett knew how to handle hostile witnesses and courtroom drama. She'd taken on everyone from Matt Gaetz to Jim Jordan, and never backed down. What many people didn't know about Crockett was her preparation style. As a lawyer, she had learned never to ask a question she didn't already know the answer to. She researched her opponents meticulously, gathering every piece of information she could find. Her staff called it Crockett's homework, the exhaustive background work that made her so dangerous in hearing. She had a team of researchers who monitored social media, tracked voting records, and maintained detailed files on every member she might face in committee. When she walked into any hearing, she knew more about her opponents than they probably knew about themselves. This wasn't just political theater for her, it was strategic warfare. But Donalds had been targeting her for weeks, questioning her credentials, her record, even her committee assignment. He had gone on conservative talk radio shows specifically to mock her legal background, suggesting she was just another ambulance chaser who got lucky. The attacks had been relentless and personal, designed to undermine her credibility before she could establish herself in Congress. Conservative media had picked up on the attacks, painting Crockett as all flash and no substance. Fox News contributors regularly dismissed her as another AOC wannabe who was more interested in Twitter than legislation. It was personal now, and Crockett doesn't forget personal attacks. She had been waiting for the right moment to strike back, and Donalds was about to give her the perfect opportunity. The confrontation centered on the Community Reinvestment Act, a banking law that requires financial institutions to help meet the credit needs of low-income communities. During a private Republican caucus meeting 3 weeks earlier, Donalds had allegedly made inflammatory comments about the law, calling it a Democrat scam to buy votes from poor people. The meeting had been particularly heated, with several moderate Republicans expressing concerns about the party's messaging on economic issues. Sources who were in the room said Donalds had been particularly vocal, going off on a rant that made even some conservative uncomfortable. One member reportedly tried to change the subject, but Donalds kept going, digging himself deeper with each comment. When word leaked to the press, Donalds immediately denied it. He went on Fox News, posted on social media, even held a press conference declaring it fake news and Democrat lies. He specifically accused Crockett of spreading the rumors, calling her desperate for attention and suggesting she was making up stories to stay relevant. This wasn't just about one comment. Donalds was being considered for a key leadership position in the Republican caucus. Any controversy could derail his ambitions. Meanwhile, Crockett was fighting for credibility in a Congress where young women of color often got dismissed. The House Financial Services Committee hearing on banking regulations was supposed to be routine. These hearings typically drew minimal attention: a few financial reporters, some industry lobbyists, and the usual C-SPAN audience of political junkies. But word had leaked that morning that Donalds was planning to confront Crockett directly, and suddenly everyone wanted to be in the room. The hearing room was packed beyond capacity. Reporters lined the walls, congressional staffers filled every available seat. Even lobbyists who normally skipped these sessions showed up, sensing that something dramatic was about to unfold. The energy was palpable, like the moment before a championship boxing match. But when Crockett brought up Donalds' alleged comments during her questioning of a witness, Donalds saw his opportunity to strike back hard and publicly humiliate her. This was his moment to show the Republican base that he could take on any Democrat and win. The conservative media would love it. His fundraising would explode. His leadership ambitions would be secured. He had no idea she'd been recording everything. He had no idea that his private moment of political theater was about to become the most public humiliation of his career. The tension had been building all morning. Committee Chairman Patrick McHenry was trying to keep the hearing focused on banking regulations. But everyone could feel the electricity in the air between Donalds and Crockett. Crockett was pressing Yellen about enforcement of the Community Reinvestment Act, when she casually mentioned concerning comments from some members of this very committee about the act being nothing more than vote by. The words were carefully chosen, deliberately vague but unmistakably targeted. Crockett had learned this technique in courtroom cross-examinations: plant the seed, let the opponent react, then spring the She didn't look at Donalds as she spoke, but she could feel his reaction from across the room. Donalds' head snapped up like he'd been struck by lightning. His jaw tightened. His hands gripped the edge of the table. This was exactly what he had been expecting, what he had been preparing for. His staff sitting behind him exchanged worried glances, but Donalds felt only excitement. Finally, she was giving him the opening he needed to destroy her credibility once and for all. The other committee members sensed the tension immediately. Chairman McHenry looked up from his notes with concern. Ranking Member Waters glanced between Donalds and Crockett like a referee watching boxers before the first bell. The entire dynamic of the hearing had just shifted from routine policy discussion to personal combat. When Donalds's 5-minute questioning period began, he completely ignored Yellen and turned his attention directly to Crockett. "I have to address the false statements made by the gentle lady from Texas," he began, his voice rising with indignation. "She has been spreading lies about private conversations, attributing quotes that were never said, and engaging in the worst kind of political gossip." The Republican side of the committee erupted in supportive murmurs. Crockett sat perfectly still, her hands folded, watching Donalds with the calm focus of a trial lawyer who knows she has the winning evidence in her briefcase. "These are desperate tactics from someone who clearly doesn't understand the serious work we do here," Donalds continued, warming up to his theme. "The gentle lady should focus on learning the issues instead of manufacturing controversy." He was feeling confident now, feeding off the energy from his Republican colleagues. "Mr. Chairman, I think it's important that the American people know when members of this committee are willing to completely fabricate statements for political gain." He turned to look directly at Crockett, his voice dripping with disdain. "The gentle lady from Texas has been telling reporters and posting on social media that I made statements about the Community Reinvestment Act that I absolutely never made. That's a complete lie, and she knows." The Democratic side stirred restlessly. Ranking Member Maxine Waters looked ready to jump in, but Crockett caught her eye and shook her head slightly. She had this handled. Donalds was on a roll. "I challenge the gentle lady to provide any evidence at all of these alleged statements, because they don't exist. This is fake news, pure and simple." He pointed directly at Crockett, his voice echoing through the hearing room. "Stop lying about your colleague. Stop making things up for Twitter clicks, and start doing the job the people of Texas sent you here to do." The room was electric with tension. Republican members were nodding approvingly. Conservative staffers in the back were already typing furiously on their phones, knowing this would be clipped and shared across right-wing social media within minutes. Some were already crafting tweets, with phrases like "Donalds destroys lying Democrat" and "Crockett exposed." You could see the confidence radiating from Donalds. He was in his element, cameras rolling, conservatives cheering, and what he thought was a helpless opponent sitting across from him. This was the moment he had been building toward for weeks. He was about to humiliate Jasmine Crockett on national television and solidify his position as the Republican Party's top attack dog. Chairman McHenry banged his gavel. "The gentleman's time has expired," but Donalds wasn't quite finished. As he sat down, he muttered just loud enough for the microphones to pick up, "Some people will say anything for attention." McHenry, looking uncomfortable with the direction the hearing had taken, reluctantly recognized her. "The gentle lady from Texas is recognized." Crockett stood slowly, her phone in her hand. The room was dead silent except for the clicking of cameras and the hum of C-SPAN's equipment. "Miss Donalds," she said, her voice calm but carrying clearly through the hearing room. "You just called me a liar in front of the American people. You challenged me to provide evidence. You said these statements don't exist." She held up her phone, finger hovering over the screen. "Well, sir, would you like to hear the recording?" The color drained from Donald's face. His chief of staff, sitting directly behind him, went rigid. Republican members who had been smugly nodding seconds earlier suddenly looked very uncomfortable. Donalds tried to maintain his composure, but his voice cracked slightly as he responded, "I don't know what game you're playing, but it's not a game, Mr. Donalds," Crockett interrupted smoothly. "It's evidence. Audio evidence of the Republican caucus meeting from 3 weeks ago." The hearing room erupted. Chairman McHenry was banging his gavel frantically. Republican members were shouting, "Point of order." Democrats were calling for the recording to be played, Reporters in the back were frantically typing and calling their newsrooms, but all eyes were on Byron Donalds, who was now clearly panicking, and Jasmine Crockett, who looked like a prosecutor who had just presented the smoking gun. What happened next would be replayed millions of times across social media, dissected on every news show, and forever change how Congress handles internal disputes. With the hearing room in chaos and cameras rolling live, she pressed play on her phone and held it close to her microphone. The audio quality was crystal clear, and the voice was unmistakably Byron Donalds. Look, let's be honest about what the Community Reinvestment Act really is. It's a Democrat scam to buy votes from poor people. We force banks to make bad loans to people who can't pay them back, and then we act surprised when it creates problems. It's vote buying, plain and simple. We dress it up in fancy language about community investment, but it's really just another welfare program designed to keep certain communities dependent on government and voting Democrat. The silence that followed was deafening. You could literally hear reporters' phones buzzing with notifications, as the clip was already being shared and uploaded in real time. The sound of fingers frantically typing on keyboards filled the room as news alerts went out across the nation. Donald's face went from red to pale white in seconds. His mouth opened and closed like a fish, gasping for air. This wasn't just embarrassing, this was career-ending material being broadcast live to millions of Americans. Donalds shot to his feet, his face red with anger and embarrassment. That recording is illegal. You can't record private caucus meetings. This is a violation of House rules. But Crockett was ready for that too. Mr. Donalds, I wasn't in your Republican caucus meeting. I received this recording from someone who was concerned about your statements and felt the public had a right to know. She paused, letting that sink in before delivering the knockout blow. Someone from your own party thought your comments were so inappropriate that they recorded them and shared them with me. The Republican side exploded in chaos. Members were shouting over each other, demanding to know who had recorded the meeting. Conservative staffers were frantically texting and making phone calls. Chairman McHenry looked completely overwhelmed. Ranking Member Maxine Waters seized the moment. Mr. Chairman, I move that we suspend the hearing and launch an immediate investigation into these deeply troubling statements about a law designed to combat redlining and discriminatory lending practices. Other Democratic members quickly joined in. This is exactly the kind of thinking that created the housing crisis, shouted Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who wasn't even on the committee but had rushed in when word spread through the Capitol. How can we trust Mr. Donalds to fairly evaluate banking regulations when he clearly views programs designed to help underserved communities as scams? Demanded Representative Katie Porter, armed with her signature whiteboard. Within minutes, Donald's recording was trending nationwide. The clip was being shared across Twitter, TikTok, Instagram and YouTube faster than social media platforms could track. News alerts were pinging on phones across Washington. CNN interrupted regular programming for breaking news. MSNBC cleared their afternoon line. Fox News found themselves in the awkward position of having to cover a story that made one of their favorite Republicans look terrible. Donalds, realizing he was in full damage control mode, tried multiple strategies rapidly. First, he attacked the recording. This is clearly edited and taken out of context. I was discussing different viewpoints, not expressing my own opinion. When that didn't work, he went after Crockett. This is a desperate attempt to distract from real issues by someone who has no substantive contributions to make. Finally, he tried to blame Democrats broadly. This is exactly the kind of underhanded tactics we expect from the radical left. Secret recordings. Gotcha politics. Anything to avoid talking about their failed policies. But his voice was shaking. Sweat was visible on his forehead, and his usual confident demeanor had completely crumbled. Through it all, Crockett remained calm and professional. When given the opportunity to respond, she didn't gloat or attack personally. Instead, she focused on the substance. Mr. Donalds called me a liar in front of the American people. He challenged me to provide evidence. I provided that evidence. The recording speaks for itself. She then delivered a masterful closing that would be quoted for weeks. The Community Reinvestment Act has helped millions of Americans achieve homeownership and build wealth. It's not a scam or vote buying. It's about ensuring that banks serve all communities, not just wealthy ones. And anyone who thinks helping working families access credit is somehow inappropriate shouldn't be making policy about banking regulation. House Speaker Mike Johnson's office was flooded with calls from donors, conservative media figures, and Republican members demanding answers. The questions were flying. Who recorded the meeting? How many other recordings might exist? What other controversial statements had been captured? And most importantly, how do they contain this disaster? Several Republican members were quietly distancing themselves from Donald's comments. Those don't represent my views or the views of our caucus. One senior Republican told reporters on condition of anonymity. The Democratic celebration was instant and overwhelming. Within hours, Queen Jasmine was trending alongside Donald's recording. Progressive activists were calling it the political moment of the year. Young Democrats across the country were sharing the clip with comments like, "This is how you handle bullies." And she came with FEITTs. The energy was electric in Democratic offices across the Capitol. Staffers were high-fiving in hallways. Progressive fundraising groups immediately launched campaigns around the moment, raising hundreds of thousands of dollars within hours. This is what happens when we fight back with facts. One Democratic strategist texted to reporter. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez tweeted within minutes. "When they go low, we bring evidence. Our Jasmine for US just showed the country how it's done. This is what preparation and integrity look like." Nancy Pelosi, not one to miss a political opportunity, issued a statement calling Crockett's response a masterclass in holding truth to power and demanding Donalds' immediate removal from the Financial Services Committee. Back in the hearing room, Chairman McHenry finally managed to restore some semblance of order. But the damage was done. The hearing that was supposed to be about banking regulations had become entirely about Byron Donalds' credibility and Jasmine Crockett's trial. When reporters tried to ask Donalds questions as he left the hearing, he pushed past them without comment, his usual media-friendly demeanor nowhere to be found. His staff formed a protective circle around him as they rushed toward the elevators. Crockett, by contrast, stopped to answer every question. "I came here to do serious work on behalf of my constituents," she told the crowd of reporters. "When a colleague calls me a liar on national television, I'm going to respond with facts. That's what people expect from their representatives." As she walked away, someone in the crowd shouted, "How did you get the recording?" Crockett turned back with a slight smile. "You'd be surprised how many Republicans are tired of this kind of rhetoric too." The recording heard round the Capitol had immediate and far-reaching consequences that nobody could have predicted. What started as a routine committee hearing had become a political earthquake that would reshape careers, relationships, and the very way Congress conducted its business. Within 6 hours of the hearing, Donald's recording had been viewed over 50 million times across all platforms. The hashtag was trending not just in the United States, but internationally, as the clip spread across global social media networks. Byron Donalds' office was overwhelmed. His phone lines crashed from the volume of calls, some supportive, many critical, others threatening. His usual confident social media presence went completely silent. Staff members were reportedly updating their LinkedIn profiles and reaching out to headhunters by that evening. Jasmine Crockett, meanwhile, saw her social media following explode overnight. She gained over 200,000 new Twitter followers in 24. Democratic fundraising platforms reported their biggest single-day haul in months, with small-dollar donors specifically citing the confrontation as their motivation for giving. House Speaker Mike Johnson was forced to announce an immediate investigation into the circumstances surrounding the recording. But this created its own political nightmare for Republicans. Investigating how the recording was made would inevitably mean investigating what Donalds had actually said. "We need to get to the bottom of how private caucus discussions are being recorded and distributed," Johnson said in a carefully worded statement. "But we also need to ensure all members conduct themselves appropriately in all settings." The careful language fooled no one. Johnson was clearly trying to thread the needle between supporting Donalds and acknowledging the problematic nature of his comments. Several moderate Republicans privately welcomed Donalds being taken down a notch, viewing him as too ambitious and too willing to make inflammatory statements for media attention. Byron was getting too big for his britches, one senior Republican member told Politico on background. Maybe this will teach him some humility. But Trump-aligned Republicans rallied around Donalds, framing the entire episode as a Democratic hit job. "This is exactly the kind of dirty tricks we expect from the radical left," posted Representative Matt. "They can't win on the issues, so they resort to secret recordings and gotcha politics." The biggest question consuming Washington was who made the recording. Republican leadership launched an internal investigation, interviewing every member and staffer who had been in the caucus meeting. Lie detector tests were reportedly discussed. Names circulated in whispered conversations throughout the Capitol. Some suspected moderate Republicans who had been uncomfortable with the party's direction. Others pointed to staff members who might have been motivated by conscience or career ambitions. The paranoia was palpable. Republicans began checking their phones at the door before caucus meetings. Some members started bringing their own security. The unity and trust that leadership had been working to build was shattered overnight. Political commentators had a field day analyzing every aspect of the confrontation. CNN's political team broke down Crockett's strategy minute by minute, praising her courtroom instincts and perfect timing. "She let him hang himself," explained Democratic strategist James Carville on MS. "She stayed calm, let him get more and more aggressive, and then delivered the knockout punch when he was most vulnerable. It was masterful." Conservative media struggled to find an angle that didn't make Donalds look terrible. Fox News initially tried to focus on the illegal recording narrative, but even their host seemed uncomfortable defending the actual content of Donalds's comment. "Look, if you're going to say something controversial, you better be prepared to defend it publicly," admitted Tucker Carlson during his evening show. "You can't call something a scam in private and then act outraged when people find out about it." Beyond the political drama, the recording sparked a serious policy debate about the Community Reinvestment Act. Banking industry lobbyists, who had been quietly working to weaken the law, suddenly found themselves in the spotlight. Progressive organizations seized the moment to push for stronger enforcement. "This recording proves what we've been saying all along," said National Community Reinvestment Coalition President Gus. "There are powerful interests that want to roll back protections for underserved communities, and they're not shy about saying so when they think no one is listening." The Biden administration announced it would accelerate proposed updates to CRA regulations, directly citing the need to counter efforts to undermine programs that promote economic justice. The Republican leadership position he had been considered for quietly disappeared from discussion. Invitations to appear on major news shows dried up. Conservative donors began returning his calls less frequently. His wife Erica was reportedly furious about the situation. Friends said she had warned him repeatedly about his increasingly provocative rhetoric and predicted it would eventually backfire. Byron started believing his own hype. One longtime friend told the Tampa Bay Times he thought he was untouchable, and it made him reckless. Jasmine Crockett's star, meanwhile, continued its meteoric rise. She was invited to appear on every major news program. Progressive organizations courted her for endorsements. There was immediate speculation about her future ambitions: Senate run, gubernatorial campaign, even national office. But Crockett played it smart, focusing on policy rather than personal attacks. In interview after interview, she redirected attention to the substance of banking regulations and community investment. "This was never about me versus Byron Donalds," she told CNN's Anderson Cooper. "This was about standing up for the truth and defending programs that help working families build wealth." The incident fundamentally changed how Congress operated. Members became much more careful about their language in private settings. Caucus meetings became more formal and structured. Some Republican members started bringing their own recording devices to meetings as protection against future selective leaking. House leadership from both parties worked to establish new protocols for handling internal disputes. "We can't have every committee hearing turning into a personal attack session," complained one veteran Democrat. As the immediate shock of the confrontation wore off, deeper questions remained. Had the recording been legal? House ethics rules were murky about recording private caucus meetings, and legal experts were divided on whether Crockett could face any consequences for using it. Would more recordings surface? The paranoia among Republicans suggested there might be other compromising audio floating around Washington. How would this change political discourse? Some worried that the episode would lead to even more guarded, scripted interactions between parties. Others hoped it would encourage more honesty and accountability. The speed and reach of the viral moment demonstrated the new reality of political communication. A single smartphone recording had more impact than millions of dollars in campaign advertising or weeks of traditional media coverage. "This is the new paradigm," explained social media expert Alyssa Rosenberg. "Politicians can't assume anything is truly private anymore. Every statement, every meeting, every conversation could potentially become public instantly." 6 months later, the confrontation between Byron Donalds and Jasmine Crockett was still being cited as a turning point in modern political communication. Political science professors assigned it as required viewing in their courses on congressional oversight and political accountability. Law schools used it as a case study in courtroom tactics applied to political setting. The moment had spawned countless memes, inspired a Saturday Night Live cold open, and been referenced in dozens of other political confrontations. Whenever a politician demanded evidence for claims against them, social media would immediately respond with clips of Crockett saying, "Would you like to hear the recording?" It had become the gold standard for political comebacks. Proof that in the smartphone era, preparation and evidence would always triumph over bluster and denial. The phrase Byron Donalds moment entered the political lexicon as shorthand for a spectacular self-inflicted political wound. For future politicians, the lesson was clear: authenticity matters more than ever, because deception is harder to maintain in an age of instant recording and global sharing. But perhaps the most important lesson was simpler: when someone challenges you to provide evidence of your claims, you better be prepared for them to actually have it. In trying to discredit Jasmine Crockett as a liar and attention seeker, Byron Donalds had inadvertently made her one of the most respected and influential voices in Congress. And in demanding evidence he was certain didn't exist, he had provided the very platform for his own downfall. As one veteran political observer put it, Byron Donalds learned the hard way that in the smartphone era, there's no such thing as a private conversation. And Jasmine Crockett learned that sometimes the best response to an attack is simply to press play. What did you think of this political showdown that completely changed the game? Do you believe politicians should be held accountable for their private statements? Or does this kind of recording cross an ethical line? Are we living in a new era where nothing is truly private anymore? More importantly, which side handled this confrontation better? Was Crockett justified in using the recording, or should she have found another way to respond to Donalds' attacks? And what does this mean for the future of political discourse in America? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one and love hearing your perspectives on these explosive political moments. And if you want to stay updated on all the latest political drama and behind-the-scenes moments that shape our democracy, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification. In today's political climate, you never know when the next explosive confrontation will happen, and we'll be here to break it all down for you with the analysis and context you won't get anywhere else. Who do you think will be involved in the next major political clash? What other secrets might be hiding in the halls of Congress? Will Byron Donalds recover from this devastating moment, or is his political career permanently damaged? Stay tuned, because we'll be here to cover every twist and turn in this ongoing political drama. The story of Byron Donalds and Jasmine Crockett is far from over, and neither is the broader war for the soul of American politics.